Hi, I'm Father Peter DeGanzik, pastor of St. Joseph's Parish in Kings Park.
And I'm Randi Hockenberger, Director of Evangelization.
And I'd like to welcome you to another one of these episodes of Catholic Conversations here at St. Joseph's. I know that we have been doing a lot of episodes with parishioners, and next week we will have a set of parishioners on if the schedule all works out. Jamie and Mary Ramos, who are very active in our music ministry and liturgical ministries here in the parish and are very supportive of many of the things we do, will be our guests. And I do understand that they just recently celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary, so it's going to be really fun to have them on as guests on the program. But know this, we are committed to making these podcasts every week, so this week it'll be Randi and I again, and we're going to have a really good time, I think, discussing some of the various things that are going on here at the parish now that we're going into summer mode. First thing I'd like to do is ask you to like and subscribe. I do it every week, so I'm just going to do it up front this time so you hear it before you check out on us. If you could, maybe drop a comment down below just to let us know that you're with us. Give us a hello, thumbs up, something. We also do appreciate when you do share these things. We're available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you have any ideas or things that you would like to throw in the comments to let us know of things that you would hope that we would one day discuss, please let us know. We've got some very good ideas for today's episode, and so I would just like to ask that if there is something that's pressing on your mind, please let us know. We also thank those who have been generous. Someone did ask about giving to the parish for the podcast. And no, we don't at this time have a specific category for giving to the podcast. But what you can do is select the free will offering, and then at the notes, just write down in support of the podcast. So again, thank you all for your generosity. I know that you've been keeping busy yourself here, even though we're in this transition mode. One of the things that has been keeping me busy, especially since Father Tom Tassone has left, is I've pretty much taken over all of the wedding intakes and doing all of the weddings. Now, when I was first ordained, it seemed like I never got a weekend off from weddings because we were doing so many. The number of Catholic weddings has dropped. I will admit it's dropped. Not as many people are coming to the church for a variety of different reasons which we could talk about.
How many people are getting married in general, so it's a bigger drop.
Good point. That part I haven't got actual data for, but I do for the Catholic side of it. But the young couples who are coming, I do believe are coming with a real joy in their heart and a real desire for the sacrament. And so just as like that kind of overview, if any young couple is looking at or a parent who's got a child who's coming up, this might be a little bit helpful. The church, first off, is very, very open to young couples who are in love wanting to celebrate the sacrament of marriage. And sometimes they seem to view us as, the church is like against us doing what we want. Well, I can't say we're against doing what you want, but there is a type of ritual that we have to follow. So there are certain things that are must-haves within the ceremony itself. One of the things that had been quite contentious for a little while in my priesthood, but it's not there anymore, is writing their own vows. So in my preparation with them, I keep reminding them that this is a sacrament and that the way the sacramental liturgy has to unfold is that you say these words. It's just like me saying Mass. I can't just pick up the bread and say anything I want. I have to say, take this, all of you, and eat. This is my body. If I say anything else, it does not become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. The same thing with the vows as well. So when planning a wedding liturgy, I keep reminding them that basically it's ceremony and Mass following the Roman rite built up around the vows. The vows are the heart of the ceremony or Mass if they choose to have one. The preparations that go into it, though, and a lot of couples don't understand, it seems like, we have a lot of a paperwork chase. We do. There's a couple of things that we need to do for a couple to marry in the church. The first one is called a prenuptial investigation. Prenuptial investigation is a basic form with specific canonical questions on it that I have to ask each one of them separately and technically under oath, although I never put the hand on the Bible oath, but technically they're supposed to be under oath, basically swearing that their answers to these questions are true. And they basically have to do with questions on previous marriage, whether or not they've ever been ordained or taken a profession for religious order, whether or not they're related as brother and sister or cousins or anything like that. We need to know that. The one that always throws a little curveball when I'm going down through it, though, is the one on psychological counseling. Have you ever seen any form of counseling? And they look at that like with a surprise, because let's face it, almost everybody today could basically say, well, yeah, I saw a counselor for a little while. So I usually have to clarify it a little bit. what was the depth, what was the reason, what was the cause? Because if you have any real psychological imbalance or inability to make a informed decision on marriage, we need to know that. And so if it was just one of these things, I was just going through a rough patch at work and I just wanted to get my head on straight, I usually don't put that one down. There's also questions then on the goods of marriage. Are you doing this freely? Do you want to have children? And for the most part, I always get the right answers for all those questions, and then we're able to continue. Then I need them to get things like baptismal certificates, and I give them a form with 2 signatures each. What they have to do is get 2 of their family members to basically swear they've never been married before. This affidavit of freedom to marry is pretty much a standard thing now in all the churches, because traditionally the way we did that was with the banns of marriage, whether they were announced from the pulpit back centuries ago or put into the bulletin like we do today. That's our way of informing the community, say that Randi is getting married. And everybody goes, oh, I love Randi, she's such a sweetheart. Oh, what about that other husband that she had? The reason we put it in the bulletin is for them to come forward and say, oh, by the way, I know about this husband that she had. How is this possible? Mm-hmm. So, of course, the caricature, I like to tell the couples, the caricature is like if you're watching a movie and the preacher stops the ceremony right before the vows and asks if anybody has any reason whatsoever. I'd like to know if there's a reason whatsoever sooner than right before your vows. But that's why we do that. So it seems like there might be a little bit, but it's just all part of the church's, I guess, knowledge that we've developed over a couple of millennia of things that could go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and people don't necessarily realize this, and it's different in the Orthodox Church as I understand it. But as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, the minister of the sacrament is the bride and the groom. But I mean, most brides and grooms didn't go to school for theology, don't have MDivs, have not been formed in a seminary for many years. So it is a way of, more so than just what you have to cross in terms of T's and dot in terms of I's, a way of having that pastoral conversation that helps them maybe understand something about the bond that they intend to enter that maybe they didn't think about while they were dating and falling in love and, being mired in a lot of what the world tells us marriage is supposed to be.
It is interesting too, because people are very confused nowadays when we talk about the sacrament versus just getting married, say going to a justice of the peace. Going to a justice of the peace, the church will not recognize that because it's not sacramental. You know this because you work with baptism intakes. How many couples now come in, they want to be a sponsor, but they're married outside the church. We then have to do what's called a convalidation, take that civil bond and turn it into a sacramental bond. Otherwise, it invalidates them for being godparents. This is one of those touchy things because a couple, by the time they, like parents after they've had a baby, by the time they get to us, have already had their heart set on who they want to be the godparents. And so it's a really touchy conversation that you get into. So I would say to anybody out there, if you're in a civil marriage and there's nothing that's blocking you from getting married in the church, contact your parish priest and set up a convalidation. It's a much simpler process because there won't be big parties, there won't be long, it can be a very simple ceremony. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It can all be wrapped up in a couple of weeks usually. Just get it done.
Yeah, and even if there is something that is blockading them, whether it's previous marriage or some other impediment, the pastoral conversation is for that too. And I know that it's always been on your heart as a pastor. You've always taken these matters, seriously and given yourself your time generously to sit with people and walk with them and counsel them on these things to the extent that I've been able to do it too. I've sat with people and I've encouraged them to get their marriages regularized and be able to come freely to the sacraments, to be godparents. And it's a hard thing for some people. Some people do have to go through a number of processes. Some of them even have to get annulments and such, which can be another process in and of itself. But whenever I have walked with somebody who's gone to the other side of that, there's so much freedom and peace and healing. And during it, they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I have to remember this. I have to talk to this person. I have to get this other thing. And it's like, yes. And so you walk with them through the difficulty of it. But on the other side of it, it's like, wow, I didn't know I could feel this free or at peace or unburdened again. And this is really what it's about. This is not just about, freeing you on a surface level. Like, say, for instance, like a divorce might be like, okay, we've divided our assets, we've gone our separate ways, this. But no, it actually goes to the heart of what was broken there or what never was. And it brings that freedom to that deep, deep place. And it's been a beautiful thing to see. It's probably one of my, the thing I feel most blessed as a pastoral minister, to walk with people in those instances.
It is, and it's a difficult thing. And I know a lot of people from my generation, their lives got really messed up. No easy way to say it. They got into a relationship that wasn't a good one because their parents said, you have to marry in church. They married in church, and sure enough, that's now a sacramental marriage. And the only way to basically get married again is to get what you just referred to, an annulment. Annulments are not easy. I've walked the journey with plenty of people who have had to get an annulment. It's a time-honored process that delves into whether or not a sacrament occurred. And this is the confusing part to people, because like you hinted, it's not like going to a secular judge who will just look at the facts and say, oh, well, so-and-so did this and you did that, and, we're going to just have this mutual parting of the ways and everything is good. It has to determine why a sacrament would not have taken place. And if it weren't for a little exceptive clause in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus said, except for, porneia is the word, except for, something that has to do with the sexual realm, Jesus left that door open just enough for the church to say there can be situations in which, when the couple freely thought they were coming to the altar to get married, they were not free. There could be some sort of a psychological blockade. I've had some...
Hence that counseling question.
And we're back to the counseling question again. I've had a couple. I had a young woman whose wedding I did. Not 6 months into the marriage, her husband got arrested for being a peeping Tom, peeking in people's houses. So now all of a sudden this is coming out. She finds out too that, now this was back before the internet really, so he had all these 800 dial-up numbers of all of these sex lines and all these other things. I said to her, those are perfect grounds for an annulment, because had you known this, you would have married him, or at least wouldn't have married him until he stopped breaking the law and doing all of these things. It's that kind of thing that they'd look for. So sometimes when the advocate first sits with a person, they're asking them all of these questions about their dating life, about their families, about the family of origin, or looking for maybe this psychological impediment. They get all frustrated because it's like, well, but he was yelling at me, and he would come home and he would throw things around. And okay, but that might be the reason you eventually broke up, but that doesn't prevent the sacrament. And that's the tension I think that we run into so often. And I feel bad for people because you didn't get into the situation easily, but I've always learned from my own personal thing, anything that I didn't get into easily, I'm not going to get out of easily.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what contributed to a lot of the freedom and the peace that comes out of it, is because, you go through, like, the only way out of something is going through it. It's hard, but there's more of a reward there. And, part of it too is, all right, so, you were in seminary for what, 8 years?
No, actually, I did the 5 years of the major seminary, but I only did one at the college level because I'd already had a college degree. Right,
but so if a young man wanted to come
straight through, it would be 9 years.
Yeah, right. So what we have here is with couples that decide to become engaged. Usually, it used to be that the engagements are very short. Now, more than often than not, they're over a year. Maybe they're coming to the church at least a year, maybe a little bit more out from that. They have a pre-Canon class they go to. Sometimes it's online. Maybe they have a couple of meetings with Father, about what to read. But like in terms of the formation, like we're talking about a vocation that is put on par with ordination, right? We talk about the sacraments that are at the service of communion. You've got marriage here, and you've got holy orders here, and there seems to be such a divide between the amount of formation that it takes to become a priest, the amount of preparation they give you for married life, and yet we uphold marriage and the family as such an important institution within the church. This is our domestic church. Holy, intact families are the backbone of a healthy church and a healthy society, and yet oftentimes, and this is something that's been lamented about in Catholic circles for decades now, if not more, is that lack of proximate preparation for the sacrament that these couples go through. Whereas, if they had more preparation, perhaps more eyes wide open, there would be a little bit more of that discernment prior to the marriage.
There are things that I believe are shifting and changing. And first off, I can say flat out, By the time a couple gets to my doorstep, there's not much that we're going to do that's going to change any trajectory or anything like that, because they've already reached that point where they're now engaged. So they've been dating. When I was first ordained, the couples that were coming to me actually were younger than they are today. The couples would come out of college maybe a year, 22, 23, 24 years old, and be married by 25 or 26. Now they're not coming to my doorstep until 28 or 29, so they're even more entrenched in a lifestyle. They've been dating a lot longer. Couples will easily tell me, oh, we met in high school 10 years ago. So, there's been a long courtship. John Paul II brilliantly said in Familiaris Consortio that your pre-Cana, original pre-Cana, started when you were like 2 and 3 and 4 years old, observing relationships around you, just seeing how family life is. That's going to teach you so much more. By the time you start reaching an age of dating, now that's the next level of pre-Cana. And then that final proximate preparation that we do should only be reinforcing what they've already experienced. Sadly, lots of young people are coming from a lot of broken homes. Again, my generation really messed up a lot. I know a lot of my contemporaries whose marriages maybe 10, 15 years, and children are caught in the crossfire, and now they're out and they've civilly remarried outside the church and all this other stuff. This is what these young people have observed. The beauty is, some of the young couples that are coming to me today, like Nicole and Ted, like Samantha and her intended, they're ones who are coming in with faith first, making a huge difference in what we could do with them in this proximate preparation. It's not going to, there's no easy change that we're going to make that's going to make marriage preparation better, other than being better at evangelization, getting better at faith formation, and building the strong families, as you said, because it's the family life that's going to ultimately be the real change that's going to help couples understand that marriage sometimes has its rough parts, and sometimes it doesn't go the way you want, and sometimes you have to change, and sometimes you have to listen. That's just part of growing in love.
Yeah, so I'm very happy with the amount of Catholic apostolates that I've seen crop up in the last decade or two. First, it was about, we realize that there are longer courtships involved, so let's have some better catechesis and formation around dating. Let's have a not just youth group investment, but young adult investment. I know of a woman, she's a contemporary of mine, but she's actually working on this like mentorship process for blended families, kind of taking you on the other side of it. So you've been through the issue and you have a multiple situation. It's not a normal nuclear family type situation. How do we be faithful Catholics in that? So there's a lot of stuff and resources out there for people now in all sorts of circumstances. But to go back to the source of it, right, and to have that investment in good formation from the get-go. So that the observation of the family life. That's why our model of family catechesis is working toward this more holistic view, where it's not just supposed to be about children in a classroom for 1 hour, right? It's supposed to be about walking with families in the long term of our vision for it, having mentorship. So this way families are supported, kids see that as they're being reared, and it's something that starts informing them, and then we can even have more of an opportunity to form them all along.
The burden that sets you free, the burden that sets us free. That's our message series, and I know that we've had a little discussion beforehand, and there might be a few sparks that could fly depending on how this goes, but I'm at a point, I'm not getting any younger, and I've just watched so many Catholics who burden themselves with life and forget about the burden that really does liberate. And so as the series has been unfolding, I've really been trying to emphasize that our commitment to Christ can't be impeded by anything of this world. Our commitment to Christ can't be blocked by anything of this world. And yet so often, how to do that is just, especially for people who do have to put food on the table, who have to clothe their kids, who have to pay the mortgage and the car and all the other things. I get it. But what I'm talking about is, in all of that, how do we put Jesus back where he belongs, which is the center of the family, the center of my life, that he is first and foremost, because this coming weekend, Jesus is going to speak some of the most cutting words that I think he speaks in any of the Gospels. If you love father or mother more than me, There's no qualification. If you do, you are not worthy of me. Tough words, and yet that's the heart of his message. Because he's going to go on and say, no, you have to take up your cross. But it closes on a very soft tone. If you give a drink to one of these little ones because of me, it's like, well, where'd that come from, Jesus? And that tying it into Paul with you were baptized into Christ, you died with him. This whole series, I've wanted, and I hope that it's clicking for some people, I wanted this to be one of those ones that challenges the person who really just sits in the pew every week and that's their faith life. Now I know doing that sometimes rattles a cage or two. Some people get upset, and I've had the conversations over the years where I started to capitulate with them because, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, that sounds very difficult and everything, and all that you're going through. But every time I've read this gospel, I say to myself, did Jesus leave a hatch through which we can escape? And I don't see it. I just don't see it. And so we were talking about this whole thing of being a consumer versus a contributor, and I'm going to be bringing it up again because that's the difference maker. If I'm constantly trying to satisfy me, especially try to satisfy me with religion or get what I want out of religion or get what I come there predisposed to get, I'm really not a follower of Jesus Christ. I want Jesus to be a follower of me, to give me what I want because I want it. Sin is what separates us from Christ. And what's the definition of sin according to Father Mike?
God, I know what you want me to do, but I want to do what I want to do.
The cross that Jesus is speaking of is, God, I know what you want me to do, and I'm going to do it. And that might mean making some really hard decisions with how I use my money, how I use my time, how I use my talent. That's tough. But to move into the realm of contributor, there's a word behind that also that I've been toying with that I really haven't emphasized enough yet. And I'm going to tie it into the cross, and that's that word offering. Offering myself for someone else. How often a husband or a wife has to offer him or herself for the other for the sake of the marriage. The wedding feast of the Lamb. There has to be this offer. I have to offer me to Jesus.
Yeah, and in that, I mean, right, he is the bridegroom, so there's an exclusivity to that. And once it says it in the Bible, you leave your father and mother, you cleave to your spouse. Well, if on this macrocosmic level, like Jesus is the bridegroom, yeah, we're giving up all to be with him. And it doesn't mean like we necessarily have to cut all of our ties, but if there's a contention, if there's a tension, if there's an ultimatum that gets put between being faithful to my family of origin and being faithful to Jesus, Jesus is making it very clear where the loyalty needs to lie.
The spirit of missionary activity that was so prevalent in much of our history was because someone was willing to say, I love you, Mom and Dad, but I have to go spread the good news of Jesus Christ to these people who've never heard of him. Now, that's a choice someone makes, to be a missionary or to be a missionary priest or to be a missionary religious. That's a particular choice, but also to be a missionary husband or wife, to be someone who's going to be proclaiming the gospel, convenient or inconvenient, even within their own family. That's, again, sometimes can be a point of division, especially I think in today's world where so much has been turned upside down in terms of people's expectation of what the church is here for. I know we've come out of a very difficult period, especially with all the scandals and other things, and I think we've had a long history of heterodoxy in the terms of the way we've approached the faith. But I know also, too, that there are a lot of people who are now coming to the church with that desire for the truth. Just give it to me straight, Father. You don't need to water it down. Just tell me where I'm at. Tell me where I need to be. Tell me how I can get there. And that, I believe, is why this particular message is so important, because when I take that yoke of Jesus upon me, I am free. I found it in my own experience, in my own life, accepting that, yeah, there is something better than what I wanted.
Yeah, we talked about the difference between license and real freedom last week. And, that imagery that always pops into my head, this, of a fenced in playground. And so you have the church who, founded by Jesus Christ, and we have guardrails in this church. We have these commands like, you must, choose me before father and mother. You must take up your cross. You must do all these things. So it's not this sense of license where I get to do whatever I want. I get to do whatever feels right in the moment. So, but those guidelines become this fenced-in area. And then what you have...
And a key thing to this analogy is that fenced-in area is on the top of a cliff.
Yes, there's that. If you go back to its originating point. But let's say, to make it more palatable to the modern day, maybe it's next to a busy street, right? So the fence is what's preventing cars from mowing down children in the playground. And because that fence is there, you can do whatever you want inside the playground. You never have to worry that you're going to fall off a cliff or that a car is going to mow you down. But you take that fence away, and all of a sudden you have to get away from the perimeter, and you don't really know where that is. So there's always a sense of this kind of low-key anxiety that rules you, because that sense of pure safety, pure security isn't there. And this is what society offers us. This is where license gets us. License says, yes, you can do whatever you want, but be prepared to not feel settled, to not feel at peace.
But it's because that person was able to run out into the street, get their ball, and get back without getting hurt. And then they did something else, and they went out there again, and then they did it again. And all of a sudden, what's the big danger out here? That's the problem, because you're still living in the danger zone.
Yeah, so I mean, any day of the week, I'd rather be burdened by the freedom I get from this fence than by that anxiousness of having to look over my shoulder every 5 seconds.
And again, what's really at the heart of this particular message is making Jesus a priority. Mm-hmm. If we're not able to do that, there's nothing in my life right now more that I want to do than to try to please Jesus by the way I live, by the way I treat others, by how I live my life. I don't want to be a person of sin. I want to be a person of liberation. I used to get the light bulbs that go on with the second graders when I was trying to explain to them how confession, they're getting ready for their first confession, how that confession is going to help free them. And I say, now think of this. You tell a lie. When you tell a lie, you've got to remember the lie you told and who you told it to. And you've got to, for the rest of your time, keep worrying about someone figuring out that lie. But if you told the truth, that would have never happened to you. Going to confession is that opportunity to say to God, you know what? I did do this, and now I want to be freed from it. That's the whole point of liberation from sin. Jesus, he doesn't just want us to not sin. He wants us to live within that space that's holy and virtuous and striving for excellence.
Yeah, and I mean, we've still been talking about, and we're going to talk about, next week's episode is going to drop the day before the 4th of July. So the whole country is basically talking about 250 years of existence, right? And we talk about this from the perspective of fighting for freedom, from patriotism, right? Nobody could look at American history and say, wow, that was easily done. They just, they gave the Declaration of Independence to the king, and he's like, you know what? Yeah, sure. You guys can have, no, there was a fight for it. It was harder. There was a burden, if you will, that the original patriots undertook, large death toll, in order to fight for that. But they understood that was going to be better than the burden that the King of England was placing on them, that they didn't have a choice in. And so this is a very similar kind of understanding of, yeah, it's going to come at a cost. But if that cost is your eternal freedom, your eternal reward, your eternal peace, then that's a burden worth taking up.
I think the reason a major conversion story becomes so endearing to people that it's because that they went from a slave to a child of God. And whenever that happens, it's got that air of liberation. There were so many of those notorious stories, like a Father Donald Calloway and of the like, where they were just living this life of license, and then one day there's Jesus, and the next thing you know, he's now a priest, bringing people all over the world on pilgrimages and writing books and doing all these great things, because once he was set free from his bondage to sin, he was able to actually enjoy and find that peace and find that sense by knowing Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, St. Augustine is probably one of the premier figures that gives us that. In his book, The Confessions, he lays it out. I have this vision now, like, if 10, 15 years we're still doing this podcast, we'll have AI is going to be fully developed. We'll have a hologram of St. Augustine here giving us his witness on how much better it was to be put under the yoke of Christ rather than all the things he chased after.
And being under the yoke of Christ is definitely better than any other yoke that's out there. So again, I encourage all of you to pray about this, to pray whether or not you're always just looking to get something, or are you willing to receive, the words that you were using before, to receive the grace and the gift so that you have something to offer to Jesus.
Right. There's a kind of a reciprocity that goes into that, as opposed to this, I'm going to have what's mine, that entitlement mentality that I think is the idea of freedom and liberty run amok, and it's the negating side of it, where because I'm free, I'm now entitled. It's like, well, no, because I'm free, I now have a responsibility, and that responsibility is always relational. So it always involves that reception, that reciprocity, that giving as I'm called to give, as I've discerned with God that I'm capable of giving, but also that openness to Him changing me at my core and unburdening me at whatever levels of woundedness I have and need.
And I always like to point this out. We did a clever little thing with talking about marriage, marriage preparation, marriage endurance, et cetera, and then talking about the wedding feast of the Lamb, which took place on the cross. That's why the church takes marriage as such an important thing. It's not just a celebration, it's an actual sacrament that binds the way Christ is bound to His church.
Yes, I recall back to when I was doing my Canon Law studies, and I had a great time with Canon Law, which, gives you just an insight into the way this works, I suppose. But I had to answer questions every week about different sections of Canon Law, and I write research paper and stuff. And I really got into this one.
And she did that all before AI.
I did do it all before AI. My goodness, I'm actually grateful for that, because now AI makes it too simple. But my professor had asked me, when it came to the canons on marriage, which there are like 160 of them, there's a lot of canons on marriage. He asked me, what, if anything, does love have to do with it? And so I had to spend a week researching the Canon Law, not just on marriage, but about love in marriage in Canon Law. My conclusion at the time, and I'm 19 years old, so I don't have a little green in terms of the world. I did conclude that canonically nothing, but then in the catechism, it made up for that. But he gigged me on one thing, and I did not fully flesh out the public dimension of marriage, the way that the husband and wife witness in the world together, and what that means for the church and the world at large. I kept on thinking of it very much like husband and wife and what they do in their home household, in their own family, in their own lives. And there is that broader scope to it that just enriches the whole thing. It's one of the reasons why marriage is elevated out of a sacrament. The visible witness of the husband and wife and the way they love one another is supposed to be reflective of the way Christ loves His church, which, newsflash for the husbands out there who are standing in that kind of analogous role, He dies on the cross for His bride. So that's what marriage is all about. So you and I did a video back when in our previous life at our previous parish in your vlog. Maybe you can put a link to that one in this.
If I can find it, there was a lot of them that we did.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things where I remember thinking love and sacrifice have to go together. And if you're talking about love and marriage and you can't replace the word love with sacrifice, then we're not actually talking about love. And I thought about that just a couple weeks ago. I was at a wedding, and all I heard was love, 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 love everywhere. Not once was it inserted in a way that could be replaced with the word sacrifice. And it wasn't a church wedding, by the way, so I wasn't expecting it. But it definitely made that difference very vivid in my mind.
And I always go back to, even in my wedding homily, I try to talk about the fact that the one thing that's not changing on that day is their love. They already had love. It's only going to become a sacramental love now. That's the only difference, is that it's going to be a bond for all eternity. I know everybody loves the reading from St. Paul, first letter to the Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind. Again, love is not one of the three goods of marriage. Love precedes the marriage and love continues in the marriage. So I always like to point that out, that that's not one of the effects of the sacrament. That being said, I know that there's a whole bunch of good things that we're working on. One of the things right now that's going on in the parish for the young families is the registration for the faith formation for the coming fall. And so I please encourage you, if you have children in our faith formation program, the registration is open now. If you know people in the parish who have children that are going to be, the registration is open now. We have an early bird discount until, what was it, July 8th?
July 8th. And we can put the link to registration also in the bottom here too. But yeah, with July 8th, you can get, I think it's $50 off for families. And then I think it's $100 off for if you wanted to be a catechist. I could be wrong about those numbers, but the form has the right numbers.
But in either case, that's only available until then. And then at some point, it's going to be shut down altogether because we need the time to plan.
Yeah.
And in years past, we had so many issues with people coming in late September, October, sometimes even into November when classes are already moving and trying to accommodate and doing all the other things. And that just doesn't happen in the real world. And so last year and this year, it's going to be once again, when we say this is the cutoff date, it's the cutoff date. And I know it's going to be either early July, late July or early August. So please be aware that we're trying to be more efficient to help you so that our classes are well planned and well laid out. When you do register, make sure you read everything and click through everything. So I've heard that a few people have just done the first part of it and didn't do the rest of it.
Yeah, it's a two-step process that we did put together, and it's because really we want to be partnering, and I mean, I'm speaking kind of on behalf of Liz, she runs the program, but the philosophy behind this is that we want to be partnering with the parents, with the families, right? This is a team effort, right? You know, it takes a village, as they say, and so the first step of that process is actually not the registration itself. It's the signing off on in a certain way, the terms and conditions, the acknowledgments that we agree to do this, we agree to do that. It's like a family-parish covenant. You're going to enter into this process with us. These are the expectations mutual that we're laying out that we want you to agree to. Once that gets filled out, then the link is received to then go and register the family. And this registration is for new families and pre-existing families alike. The questions change depending on what that status is, but that's what the twofold process is. First, it's acknowledge and consent, then it's register. And
I can't emphasize what you just said enough. We're working with the parents. I am not the formator of your child. You are. I'm just there to support your efforts in helping the child grow in the faith. The few weeks that we have them in a classroom, a catechist can only cover so many things. So that's why almost everywhere you go now, they moved away from the word education. They started calling it faith formation. They started calling it school of religion, things like that, where we're just going to give you some information, but the real formation happens in the home.
Which is kind of what we were saying before about even the preparation for marriage, right? It's all happening in the family life way early, when the prospective bride or groom is a child, even observing the way that their parents love one another and are married to one another in the ideal circumstance. And so we are here as a church for couples getting married, but also for young people receiving sacraments or preparing to receive sacraments like communion and confirmation, to help supplement what should already be going on in the school of love in their home, as Pope John Paul II liked to call it, where that is, and this is why we call the family the domestic church. You learn how to be Catholic and Christian first and foremost within your family construct. The parish exists to support that, and then parishes exists to support the church universal, and it becomes this kind of tiered hierarchy. And as we know, anything that has to be built up, if the foundation is weak, everything on top of it becomes weakened. And this is one of the reasons why when people sometimes criticize the church, right, for spending so much time on these concepts of marriage and family and not maybe talking about other issues as much, it's because you get this right, everything else falls into place.
And it makes our life so much easier. One of the great things about this new covenant thing that we're doing too is we're asking families to commit to living the faith a little bit more. So mass attendance, we've been really trying to emphasize that, and people are going berserk.
Year round, in the summer too.
All year long. Some people have really been pushing back on that, and I just for the life of me don't understand how you could say, I want my 7-year-old to receive First Communion, but I don't want them to be familiar with going to Mass.
Yeah. I'd be curious about that if anybody does have some insights about this. And I'm not saying you have to be the one that has this, but maybe you have somebody in your family, you have an understanding of it. You know, I've been in this evangelization business for a while, and I find it very confusing to me the people, the going after the sacrament, but the lack of desire to go to church on Sundays.
I just had a conversation with someone who said that because we're doing a lot on Sunday mornings now, it's an hour in class, an hour in mass. 2 hours on a Sunday is just an absurd request to ask for people. And I just thought about it for a second. I said, well, if people are going to mass, that's more important to me. If you only have 1 hour, choose mass.
Yeah. I mean, this is where, like, you know, I mean, my husband, he's not a very religious man, but he's not hypocritical about it either. So he's very much like, I don't believe, I'm not going to go to church, I'm not going to receive a sacrament. He you know, he had to receive them begrudgingly. So on paper, he looks really good. But even his younger sister never received confirmation. And I started dating him at around the time where she could have. But I actually counseled her and the family against it until something she really wanted to do. Like, if one day she wakes up and decides this Jesus is for her, I will happily walk with her to her adult confirmation process. But it wasn't something that we felt like you're being true to your agnostic desires by not. But the idea that you would want one and not the other is a bit confusing.
And again, that's that burden that sets us free, because if we really have that commitment to Jesus Christ, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And I'd love to have more conversations with people. I know that there were people, third and fourth graders, they would just drop the kids off, even though it was supposed to be at Mass that morning, we just drop the kids off just in time for class and pick them up. Mm-hmm. I just, for the life of me, just find that perplexing. And if someone could just explain why you would go to that length to teach your kid basically it's a lie. You're living a lie. But I don't want to get into judgment, because I know every situation is a little different. And every time I listen to every situation, I try to help them find the solution rather than just the imposition.
Yeah, and you know, I feel very hopeful, because I mean, I probably think part of it might be a remnant of, you know, this is something we do culturally. Like, I have some friends who have been Jewish who, you know, bar and bat mitzvah, but maybe they weren't the most attentive with going to temple and all of this. So I think there is a certain point at which it speaks to an identity, but it doesn't go deeper. Or like how you might have a relative that you see a couple times a year, and you know that you're related, but you're not really close with them. So I have a feeling it has to do with something along those lines. But what you were even saying earlier about, like, now people are coming to you and they're wanting the truth. They're wanting the plain truth. And we're seeing this, right? Because it's been in the news recently and in statistics. Gen Z has now become more religious than their parents, which, I mean, maybe not saying much because their parents weren't that religious. But the thing is, there's been an uptick around. And I think it's because people are wanting to be more honest nowadays, right? There's no impetus in a lot of the younger generations to do one thing and then not actually believe in the whole package. But then when they are given the secular package, they have realized that that's a burden that they didn't want, that they think that this is the best that we can do. I don't think so. And so a number of that generation has kind of found their way into the Catholic Church going, here, finally, some truth. And I think there's a lot of hope and things we can learn from this transition that we're in right now.
And God willing, we'll start to see somewhat of an uptick. But I still go back to the old Father Ratzinger, then back a long, long time ago, saying we might have to shrink a little to grow, just to start getting the committed faithful back on board.
And he said that like 40 years ago.
Oh, it's like 1969, I think it was.
Oh, really? Was that? I thought it was like the early 80s, like 70s, something like that.
I think it was, I'd have to go look at when the book was published. I have the book.
Yeah.
But neither here nor there. So anyhow, any other goings on you'd like to emphasize? We got the 4th of July next week.
We do have that. We've been doing our outdoor mass.
Had a beautiful 250th celebration with Deanna and the choirs. They did a wonderful job. A nice turnout. I'd say probably close to 100 people came.
Yeah, that not the outdoor mass, but the day before we had the concert. Yeah, on Kings Park Day, that was good. And then a couple days ago, by the episode this drops Wednesday of this past week, is a nativity of John the Baptist. So that's one of, you and I were talking about before, only 3 birthdays that are actually celebrated in our church calendar.
And that's the Blessed Mother, St. John the Baptist, and of course Jesus. Everybody else, the date we pick for any of the other saints is the day on which they died.
Yeah, because it's like kind of their birthday in heaven, as it were. But with John the Baptist, right, so his is calculated exactly 6 months before Jesus. So, Jesus, December 24th, 25th. So John the Baptist, June 24th, because as we know from the narrative in Luke, that Elizabeth was 6 months already pregnant with John by the time the angel visited Mary. So this is where the math works out on the nativity of John the Baptist. And with the birthdays, right? So of course, Jesus' birth, important. Mary's birth, important. Why? Because she's Jesus' mom, right? So she is going to bear Jesus. So we acknowledge that. We acknowledge her role in salvation history. And the same thing goes, well, same thing, but similar for John the Baptist. He exists as a herald of the Messiah. So his birth is important because it is ushering in this time of proximate awaiting of the coming of Jesus Christ.
And for those of you who are counting, you have 6 months of shopping for Christmas. So yeah. Anyhow, but I think everything, we're kind of transitioning now into summer mode. So there's still plenty of things going on, but it's just more, we're in that like preparation mode too, so that we're starting to look to the fall activities and other things now.
Yeah, and I think of it as a great time for people to, even in their own minds, right? We don't hang up our faith for the summer. But what does maybe my summer Catholic life look like? Maybe if it's not going to our outdoor mass, it's just making sure that we're prioritizing mass on the calendar around whatever weekend obligations we have or vacations we're planning. Maybe if there's some good spiritual books that we can read that are more like poolside, not the Confessions of St. Augustine. That's not a poolside read, but there are some really other more light ones out there, but things that we can do to continue to enrich our faith lives, or even just practicing giving gratitude for this beautiful creation God gives us to wake up every morning. And you know how much I love waking up and the sun's already up in the morning and we have these warm days.
I can't remember the last time that happened to me.
You're really an early bird, but I think just like the winter, we had such a cold, dreary winter. So every time I feel like I want to complain that it's hot, I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do it because it's beautiful. It's glorious. We have this wonderful day. What do they say in Scripture? This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Let us find a reason to be joyful this summer.
Amen. So I guess that would pretty much wrap up all of our thoughts for this week. I do again thank you all for tuning in, and don't forget, like, subscribe. If you want to give a gift, we would more than welcome that gift. So I guess we could close with a prayer.
Absolutely, Father.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Lord Jesus Christ, you are the one. You are the one who came to give us hope, to give us freedom. And so on the cross, as you offered up your Spirit, you also brought with you all of our hopes in you. And so as we burden ourselves with your love, as we burden ourselves with your kingdom and your message, help us to know that the deeper we go, the more free we become. For you are the one, you are the only one who can truly set your children free. And so on this day most especially, I do ask you to bless all married couples, bless those who have entered into the sacrament, help them to live the life of faith as you lived it to the end on the cross. Help them to understand the difference between being in love and being able to offer themselves in sacrifice for one another. We ask this of you who are Lord forever and ever.
Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Thanks be to God.